What's up, guys? Greg here. We've talked about the philosophy of South Park a lot over the years, but today we wanted to zoom in on one of your favorite characters, Cartman.
Wow. Only 3 more hours, see, people. Only 3 more hours and you can take me away from this crappy goddamn planet full of hippies.
And try to figure out if there's any philosophical method to his blue beanie madness. At first, this may seem absurd. After all, this is a character defined by his arguably sociopathic tendencies, his rampant greed, and his outlandish schemes. Of course, Cartman's antics never fail to make us laugh, cringe, or both. But is there anything more to him? Specifically, can such a hellish little jerk actually be understood philosophically? That is to say, is there a philosophy of Cartman? Let's find out in this Wisecrack edition on South Park. Is Cartman actually a nihilist? And spoilers ahead for basically all of South Park and 2 kinda cranky philosophers. But first, I want you to ponder an important philosophical question. If you watch a Wisecrack video, but nobody knows that just from looking at you, have I ever really made a sound? No need to answer because we have a solution, a fresh drop of Wisecrack merch. That's right, we have some new ways for you to cover your person and your possessions with all things Wisecrack. If you're a fan of our podcast, Show Me the Meaning, which of course I hope you are, check out our new icon tee. It's a perfect ensemble for debating which aspect ratio is best. More in the mood to pledge to the Wisecrack brand? Us too! It's in our contract. You can show your loyalty by sporting the Wisecrack candy logo fitted tee, or by sticking the Wisecrack icon sticker to your computer, water bottle, or the forehead of your nearest loved one. I love you. Visit wisecrack.store to snag these new items and to check out all of our other merch too, like hats, mugs, shirts, and stickers. That's wisecrack.store. Back to the show. Let's start with Cartman's mission statement.
Whatever, I do what I want.
In a nutshell, this can be understood as meaning I don't care about any values other than my own self-interest. I only act upon my own selfish desires.
Whatever, I ran for Congress and won. Then I had sex with an intern, killed her, and hit her body.
This slogan then first appears to be expressing a form of nihilism.
All right, then we're gonna have to eat butters.
The belief in nothing, that life has no essential meaning, and that there is no ultimate basis for things like goodness, or truth, or knowledge. The argument would go, Cartman is a nihilist because he believes in nothing, except for himself. And he can do this precisely because there is no external set of moral or ethical values outside of his own ego. We're not the first people to have this thought. In fact, a personality test website did an analysis of fictional characters and deemed Cartman the 8th most nihilistic character of all time. And to anyone who's ever seen an episode of South Park, this would probably seem to track. Cartman is rampantly greedy, he's pathologically selfish. In fact, he often appears to be completely unable to empathize with other humans. He has no understanding of the concept of guilt.
I didn't feel bad before, but now I just feel terrible.
You just feel bad for yourself that you're in detention.
Right.
He also has no ability to tell the difference between being nice and just putting on a nice sweater.
That's not being nice. That's just putting on a nice sweater.
I don't understand the difference.
At one point, he buys an entire theme park for $1 million just to keep everyone else out.
So much to do at Cartman Land, but you can't come.
Obviously, Cartman is also prolifically racist.
Minority, Mexicans and Asians, black people. I think I even saw Native American growth.
His anti-Semitism is particularly prominent and consistent. He's also all of the other bad things. Sexist.
I would never let a woman kick my ass. If she tried anything, I'd be like, hey, you get your bitch ass back in the kitchen and make me some pie.
Ableist.
Dude, I can't believe they exploit handicapped people like this. I mean, making them compete against each other just for our amusement.
And classist.
Oh wow, poor people being arrested. What a rare occurrence.
Basically, if you're a member of any sort of marginalized group whatsoever, Cartman almost certainly either hates you or somehow thinks you're less important than he is. But Cartman's hatred of non-cis white hetero males is also accompanied by a disregard for social norms in general. Sure, he's frequently and casually homophobic.
What the f is up with that?
That's f***ing gay.
But at the same time, he often exhibits an ambiguous sexual identity and sexuality. He's been known to wear clothes that transgress gender binaries, and in one episode, he attempts to prank Butters by filleting him in his sleep.
I took a picture of his wiener in my mouth.
He has also appeared to engage in sexual relationships with older men, and don't forget the time he got rich as a Christian musician by singing about his erotic love for Jesus.
I wanna get down on my knees and start pleasing Jesus. I wanna feel his salvation all over my face.
But Cartman's biggest transgression of social norms is the lack of value he puts on individual human life. Despite his mother's unwavering love, Cartman doesn't see her as a properly autonomous being.
She's my mom. I can do whatever I want with her.
And it's not just his mom he thinks he should be allowed to murder either. He's willing to kill Cal just to get out of detention.
I'm killing you, but unfortunately I could only afford a wiffle bat, so it's gonna take a while.
At his most extreme, Cartman's willing to transgress just about every rule of civilized society. He infects Cal with HIV as revenge.
He purposely infected me with his HIV virus.
Is that true, Eric? Did you give Kyle AIDS?
Well, he was being a total dick, and then he's a big tattletale going around talking crap about me.
He convinces a gullible Butters the world has ended so he can attend Cal's birthday party.
You best wait for the radiation levels to go down. Probably next week sometime. After Saturday.
He gets every adult in South Park arrested on a spurious charge of sexual abuse.
All you gotta do is call the police and say that your parents both molested you.
And during his brief stint as a ginger, he attempts to have every non-redheaded child in the world killed.
We must gather together every child who is not ginger and exterminate them!
But then, of course, there's Cartman's crowning act of nihilistic glory, the character's most memorable and definitively capital E evil scheme, his revenge on Scott Tenorman. Quick recap. Scott sold Cartman his pubes, so Cartman had Scott's parents killed and then fed their bodies to Scott in a chili.
Yeah, I made you eat your parents.
And this all happened within sight of Scott's idols, Radiohead. Because it's South Park, of course.
Jeez, what a little crybaby. You gonna cry all day, crybaby?
You know, everyone has problems. It doesn't mean you have to be a little crybaby about it.
This plotline, incidentally, is loosely based on Shakespeare's most maligned play, Titus Andronicus, but we're dorkily digressing. Okay then, so Cartman equals nihilist, right? Not so fast. Is Cartman's creed really all that nihilism amounts to? Doing what you want all the time and to hell with what harm it may cause? Is it really as simple as going to the most extreme lengths in order to satisfy your crudest, basest, most selfish desires? There have been many prominent philosophers who have flirted with elements of nihilism, from Nietzsche to Sartre. But probably the granddaddy of them all, the most consistent and proud nihilist in the history of philosophy, was a guy called Matt Stirner. Stirner defended his nihilistic philosophy in his book, The Ego and Its Own. But Stirner's slogan isn't exactly, whatever, I do what I want. Instead, it's, all things are nothing to me. Or, I have set my cause on nothing. Now, there are certainly elements of Stirner's philosophy which might resonate with one Eric Cartman. Stirner describes himself as an egoist. Right off the bat, he claims that basically every higher cause, whether it's God, the very concept of goodness, or even patriotism for one's nation, is ultimately grounded in somebody else's egotistical self-interest. So to liberate himself from this, Stirner resolves to be a consistent egoist himself. So by making nothing his primary intellectual cause, Stirner's primary cause and value is himself. Cartman is a rampant egoist as well. Indeed, in the South Park universe, the only individual who comes close to matching his egoism is Yeezus himself. Just like Kanye can't hear Jimmy's fish sticks joke without assuming it's about him,
I am not gay, and I sure as hell ain't no fish.
Cartman is determined to take credit for Jimmy's joke in the first place.
Anyway, what was really important for us as a team, Ellen, was to make sure that everyone knew that we came up with this joke.
And don't even get us started on how he believed he slayed a big dragon and saved all of mankind. In practice, what Stirner's egoism means is nothing has any meaning except the meaning I choose to give it. Therefore, I shouldn't have to do or believe anything unless I have decided to, completely autonomously for myself. Religion, family, the state, and so on are dismissed by Stirner as spooks, as fixed ideas, or as wills in the head. that we have all allowed to turn our mental gears on our behalf. The only sensible course of action, he says, is to reject them. What matters isn't doing what's right or wrong, but having the power to do what I choose. It's sort of saying like that every belief comes from inside someone's head, so you might as well believe what's coming from inside your own head. This too might sound a lot like Cartman. In many ways, Stirner shares Cartman's disregard for social norms. He's even declared that the consistent egoist should have no problems with pretty universally taboo things like incest. Ooh, damn. But Stirner's egoism and Cartman's philosophy actually lead us down two very different roads. And for one central reason, Cartman is straight up greedy for material things. He's willing to turn off Kenny's life support machine, for instance, because he knows he's first in line to inherit his PSP.
Who cares? Kenny's dead! When do I take possession of my PSP, sir?
In contrast, Stirner doesn't really care about property in the sense of property rights like Cartman does. Stirner, unlike Cartman, isn't all about owning fancy China plates or hyper-exclusive Pokemon cards. In fact, he thinks that property rights are just another pointless convention, a will in the head that true egoists ought to reject. If an egoist wanted something, he wouldn't wait to inherit it, he'd just take it for himself. But he also wouldn't bother to keep an object he wasn't using just for the sake of having it. Or in Stirner's words, I do not step back shyly from your property, but look upon it always as my property, in which I need to respect nothing. Pray do the like with what you call my property. Cartman's about as likely to say that last sentence as he is to share his french fries. Stirner's attitude toward property is informed by the fact that he refuses to correlate an egoist's thoughts with their body's sensual desires. For him, it's all a matter of principle. And part of that principle is not becoming what Stirner calls a slave to one's desires for things like sex or power. This is in stark contrast to Cartman, whose idea of doing what he wants is always to gratify his most immediate appetites, right now.
Whatever, I do what I want.
So if Stirner believes that egoists are only supposed to care about themselves, then they should have no interest in dominating other people. And yet Cartman is obsessed with status.
Kenny's family is so poor that yesterday they had to put their cardboard box up for a second mortgage.
Stirner would consider this to be a sign of weakness because Cartman needs other people to like and respect him in order to feel like a real boy. So his sense of self is actually intertwined with the egos of others. Cartman's ideal society would have him at the head of it because he longs to exercise power.
You will respect my authority.
Stirner's, by contrast, would be a union of egoists, an extremely loose, non-hierarchical collective bound only by a sort of mutual, disinterested respect. In the union of egoists, we would all agree to pretty much leave each other alone. And that's fine because nobody's cooler than I am anyway. Stirner's form of nihilism is even kinda sorta anti-discriminatory. While Stirner wouldn't think he needed to do any specific structural work to combat oppression like racism, he also doesn't think that egoists should recognize race as a thing that exists. The only level of categorization he would have been cool with was just the human species, full stop. He'd say race is just another will in the head or another thing we should all stop believing in. Which, well, we don't have time to unpack all of that. But we do know that Cartman unfortunately loves to recognize and then be totally shitty to people based on race. Stirner's version of egoism then is pretty specific. If all things are nothing, this also means that what we typically associate with the self, like needs, desires, social status, and belief systems, are also nothing. You need to reject those things as well if you want to be a consistent, nihilistic egoist. And actually, Cartman can show us why Stirner might think this. Invariably in South Park, Cartman's selfish pursuit of his own most immediate desires goes wrong. His desire for everyone to like him and think he's cool makes him an object of ridicule. His drive to own stuff at one point causes him to be literally absorbed by his Dawson's Creek trapper keeper. After he creates the ginger separatist movement, Cartman's racism very nearly leads him to getting taken out by his own followers. Okay, so Cartman's philosophy might have some superficial trappings of nihilism, a sort of dumb nihilism if you would, but his belief that nothing else matters is centered around his belief that only he matters. A true nihilist, by Stirner's definition, would leave his selfhood behind. So we're left wondering, Is there a different way to interpret Cartman's elementary school level philosophical creed beyond his reductive nihilism? Maybe. See, South Park's considered by many to be aligned with modern-day libertarianism, an ideology which prioritizes individual liberty above all other values. Fittingly, Parker even said that his main political belief is, don't tell me what to do. Not unlike Cartman.
Whatever, I'll do what I want.
So to understand Cartman, we could go back to someone who's often associated with modern-day libertarianism, Ayn Rand. Rand rejected the libertarian movement of her day, considering it to be too close to anarchy and calling libertarians hippies, with the same derision as our cartoon friend.
Goddamn hippie!
Whoa!
She preferred to identify as radical for capitalism, which sounds like a shirt an Ivy League lacrosse player named Bradford might wear while offering you scotch out of a human skull at his Freemason Society headquarters. Anyway, Rand was a novelist and philosopher, best known for writing the very, very heavy Atlas Shrugged. Her philosophy is less nuanced than Stirner's and isn't taken too seriously by most academic scholars. But that doesn't make her not interesting. Her beliefs were rooted in ethical egoism or rational self-interest, arguing that a heroic man's greatest purpose is pursuing his own happiness. Rand thought people ought to have the freedom to take all the actions required by the nature of a rational being for the support, the furtherance, the fulfillment, and the enjoyment of his own life. What sounds suspiciously like Cartman's amusement park scheme, or the time he fakes Tourette's so he can finally say whatever he wants with impunity.
Tampon! Tampon dick shit!
In both cases, it's all about him and his desires, regardless of how they affect others. Unlike Stirner's egoism, which encourages free individual thinking and self-constructed values, Rand's own creed is pretty prescriptive. The true Randian has very little intellectual wiggle room. She even started a cult following where the first rule was, Ayn Rand is the greatest human being who has ever lived. Specifically, Rand depicted her ethical egoism as most compatible with the capitalist pursuit of wealth. And unlike Stirner, who harbored loose, non-hierarchical views, Rand's ethos is pretty explicitly hierarchical. From her early days, she warned fervently against celebrating the common man. As cultural critic Lisa Dugan writes in her book Mean Girl, Ayn Rand and the Culture of Greed, Rand's novels present superior characters and eroticize their contempt for and cruelty toward inferior others. She presents readers with her ideal capitalist, a haughty individualist with no need for the collectivism of government unions or human solidarity. Now, Cartman might not be as physically jacked as Rand's heroes, whose classic masculinity was always described in very horny detail, but he seems a little like a circle-shaped version of a Randian hero. He certainly sees himself as superior to those around him, and lauds his personal power over those he finds inferior for any reason, from their race to their size.
Race war! Race war! Race war! Race war's on, everybody!
And sure, he's very recently seemed to care more about his friendships after only 24 years on the air. But still, he's typically rejected most forms of human solidarity. He only expresses interest in social movements when he can use them to his own benefit.
What is that? That's Cartman's new transgender bathroom.
Cartman's a girl now?
He's not a woman, he's not a man, he is something that you'll never understand. But he would die for me.
Or to advance his own reputation.
He's lying. Make him show you his phone.
Unfortunately, that'd be a breach of my civil rights. But I can assure you, nobody respected you girls' poignant protest more than I did.
Incidentally, Rand's heroes were initially based on a literal child murderer whom a young Rand found super sexy. The man, William Hickman, proclaimed at his trial that, I am like the state. What is good for me is only right, which Rand described as the best and strongest expression of a real man's psychology I ever heard. And if that real man murders kids, so be it, apparently. The idea that what's good for me is right certainly sounds like Cartman to a T.
I'm going around making the world a better place.
For you! You're making it a better place for you! Right? That's what superheroes do.
And that fourth grade sadist's most devious plots certainly follow what Dugan described as Rand's hero's libido-infused desire for heroic individual achievement. Cartman also shares these guys' so-called contempt for social inferiors and indifference to their plight. For Rand's heroes, individual achievement meant capitalist success and domination no matter the cost. That's a far cry from Stemmer's rejection of private property. According to Dugan, Rand's views on life best apply to those whose fantasies of success and domination include no doubt or guilt. Sound familiar?
I realize now that even though you might not get caught doing something bad, you can still get caught later.
Oh, Jesus.
Cartman certainly pursues such guiltless ends in his various entrepreneurial ventures, from starting a crack baby athletic league to opening a covert junk food business at Fat Camp. Cartman's singular lack of empathy also makes sense in a Randian context. As Rand journaled about her ideal hero, he had never learned the process of thinking about other people. Again, we've heard that one before.
This is a serious issue, Eric. What you're doing is very offensive.
Me? You're the one talking about killer titties.
Rand added that her hero is also defined by indifference, and that infinite, calm contempt is all he feels for the world and for other men who are not like him. Cartman might rarely stay calm, but contempt is somewhat his middle name. Contempt for girls.
Apologize? That's not what I said, you dumb bitch.
For Jewish people.
Mel Gibson says in the movie, Jews are the devil.
For poor people.
We would tell your parents to shop at nicer places, but your mom is so poor she can't even pay attention.
In this way, much of what makes Cartman pretty misaligned with Stirner's nihilism puts him pretty squarely in the realm of Randian acolyte. Rand's heroes may have never fed someone their own parents in a bowl of chili, but they share Cartman's pretty ruthless pursuit of his own desires. At the end of the day, both Cartman and Rand think that a real hero does what they want. By comparison, this makes Stirner's version of nihilism look almost quaint. But what do you guys think? Does Cartman make a bad nihilist, a better Randian, or both? Or is he just a completely amoral f***up? Let us know what you think in the comments. Huge thanks to our patrons for choosing altruism over selfishness. And don't forget to check out our podcast. Go hit that subscribe button like you're giving CPR to a dying Kenny. And don't forget to ring that bell. And as always, thanks for watching. Peace.